And now I'm jumping across, zooming across to the United States of America. Good morning to the US. Good morning, Baron Amu, who's my colleague in the US, BKF Hotel Experts, and Euan McGlashan, an old friend, old-time friend and colleague with Valor Hospitality. Morning, gentlemen.
Hi there, Niels.
Everything all right?
Wonderful.
As well as can be understood, yeah.
Well, exactly. It's amazing how the levels of happiness vary with every day. Euan, Valor Hospitality, give us 2 sentences. Who are you? Who is Valor Hospitality?
two sentences on Valor. Well, you know, I've been on with you before, but for those that haven't been watching, we're a third-party hospitality management company, full service, do everything from due diligence, underwriting, project management, all the way through laser-focused operations, both in the franchise space and the independent, and started the company in 2010. And today we've got a US office, UK, Europe, Africa, as you know, big office for us, and Middle East and Southeast Asia out of Bangkok. So yeah, smaller firm in relation to guys like Interstate, but had a very good run pre-COVID and actually coming out relatively strongly now as we get on the back end of this. So thank you for having me.
Great, welcome you. Baron, tell us a couple of sentences, BKF Hotel Experts, US.
Well, the US operations is clearly focused on North America. That also includes Canada and Mexico. And of course, we specialize in advisory services, feasibility studies, transaction advisory, M&A, due diligence, all of the things that you would to support the hospitality investment cycle.
Great, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. I wanted to put a particular focus today on third-party management, on franchise, on that model, and to maybe start with you, Baron. Being based in the US, that's where this model is very well known. And the crisis kind of that we're going through makes us look at our contracts and our situation. And will it impact the way we look at franchising and third-party management?
I think so. I think it's just going to exacerbate what has already been happening in terms of the term of the agreement, the way that the manager and the owner align themselves. You know, some people have actually tried to pull force majeure during this COVID crisis, and so that has really had people look at how they potentially could renegotiate the agreements to make sure they're better aligned. You know, management companies are valued on the number of management agreements and the value of that. So they have a reason to stay with the old model, but I think the market is calling for something quite different. And, you know, the evolution just in the last 10 years from, you know, going from franchises that were primarily based in the United States, now moving across the sea to Asia and to Europe, and, you know, this manchise model now that's become quite prevalent. So you're seeing the evolution of what I think is the management agreement. I think it's now just going to be accelerated because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Euan, what's your take on it?
Yeah, look, listen, franchise is my world, right? You've seen me down in Africa beating that drum for a long time, and I'm sure we're going to maybe talk about that today. But I think franchise more than ever is more desirable to the owners, because I mean, at its core, they just need more involvement. They need a stronger cultural and commercial performance out of their properties. And look, it's always a tough one for me having conversations like this, because we have a lot of deep-rooted relationships with the brands. As you know, we're heavily involved with IHG, Hilton, Marriott, Hyatt, etc. But you know, and my heart bleeds for them during COVID, because they've clearly been absolutely shredded. You've seen the furloughs and the layoffs. And the reality is, as Baron just said there, you know, they just don't have the infrastructure to be involved as a branding company and an operator, and they just don't have the regional basis. So what they need a third-party operator that's got regional, local presence, that's hands-on, sleeves rolled up, and is in there pushing performance. So franchise is a no-brainer. It's my life. It's what we do, other than some of the independent stuff. But yes is the very short answer. I think it's probably more important today than it's ever been.
Right, Baron, do you have an idea of in the States, in your market, of the ratios? How many HMAs, how many franchise agreements there are, plus minus? Is it a number that you?
I think, you know, it'd be difficult to say. which agreements are enforceable now, right? Given who the pandemic is and who's actually lost agreements because of it, right? People have really started to move away from that. And, you know, just to piggyback on what Euan said, I think the franchise model in the United States has always been quite popular. I think it's going to become more popular as we move forward in this. I think, again, you know, there's some risk elements that people tend to forget about that. And then, you know, Euan knows about the legal ramifications of agency and how management takes on that agency and fiduciary duties there. So there's something that's driving this also from the legal perspective in terms of pushing maybe that legal risk back onto the owners rather than the operators and having them develop it in a franchise model, if you were. I think that, you know, will we see a sea change? I don't know. I can't speak to that because it's not rocket science managing a hotel, but it's not easy either. I mean, you need someone there looking at it all the way through. So there's a combination there, which is why, again, I mentioned the franchise model, which seems to be something that people are gravitating to. But there are people who don't want to get their hands dirty, to Euan's point, right? People need to really roll up their sleeves. And that's not often what they want to do. They want to manage the hotel for their glory, own a hotel, I should say, for their glory, and not for necessarily, or for the financial returns, and not necessarily really dig into the details. So, you know, I think the model will exist. Franchises will always have its place here in the United States. I think the expansion that will happen will be overseas, where people are really starting to develop that and see that move exponentially.
So, I mean, if I were to put myself into shoes of an owner, Euan, what's in it for me? Why? I mean, I'm now at the situation where I've got PKF hotel experts that tell me we've got this option and that option. Now let's look at the third-party management and franchise. Why would I look rather at that option than an HMA?
Well, boy, I wish we had a day. I would give you my 3-page life according to Euan and franchise. But look, I said a number of things before. I always bring it and dilute it back to the fact that you have an emotional connection with your operator. Let's be honest, they do not have an emotion. When you have a brand and a brand managed scenario, you do not have an emotional connection with the operator. There's probably someone regional, there'll be hopefully a really good GM, and that's it. With a team like us, and it's easy for me to use Valor because clearly that's what we do. So it's not meant to be self-serving, but we have spent a lot of money in the infrastructure. We got the local teams on the ground who are dedicated, who are engaged, who are there for the owner. Owner calls us, you know, we answer in 3 rings. But if you come back to the legal, as Baron was talking about just now, you just have far more flexibility in the terms, and you can demand more from us as the operator. That's purely what it comes down to. I think Baron said that there. Look, I think there's a lot of pressure on the brands for term. You know, traditionally it was 20, 25 plus. But the one thing we all know is when you sign with a brand and you have brand managed, the management agreement effectively, even though it's embedded within the overall agreement, it runs pari passu to the license agreement. So you've got the brand in there for 20, 25 years. And yeah, there's some performance language, but the performance language and the pressure on a third-party operator is always tougher. Our terms are always shorter. And generally that's because owners, when they actually want to sell, they want to be able to sell unencumbered. Now, if it's unencumbered of management, but the brand's still there, that's still a better scenario than selling it completely encumbered, where, you know, you got these huge liquidation fees if you try to get out from under the brand, and or you stick with the brand, hopefully they're doing really well, and you can change the operator, because as you know, today in the investment world, a lot of the buyers will come with their own relationship with a hospitality manager, third party, and that's the world we live. That's what we live in the US, and that's what we live in UK. But I think overall, if we have to stick to what's important, I think it's clearly that flexibility on the terms, and I think it's that emotional engagement which leads to far greater cultural and commercial performance. And we've proven that, especially in US and UK, where you see our RGIs are through the roof. And that's, again, it's all depends on the level of work and involvement and engagement you have. So yeah, it's for me, it's always been a no-brainer. And I always see it as a huge win-win. That's why we have a great relationship with the brands, because our view is we go in there and we want to just make them look good. They want to get there. If you take any sub brand, so let's just say it's a Core Holiday Inn, so many of them are under franchise, but you've got great operators running them. The RGIs are through the roof, and that helps the brand overall. So more people are likely to want to put a Holiday Inn flag on their property. So anyway, that's what it boils down to, really, I would say.
Niels, I just want to say something here, because I don't want it to be brand bashing, right? I mean, they do serve a purpose, frankly, and specifically for underwriting a project, right? I think that banks tend to lean towards proper brand management, or 100% brand management there. That's not to say that people like Euan's group or the Interstates of the world can't enter into that market, but they do have that. There's a comfort there with banks in underwriting it in that sense. Their loyalty programs, which obviously you can get through the franchise model as well. Distribution channels, obviously, something that they can continue to move on, and they also have a direct access to some of the corporate and group access, and frankly, would probably promote a brand managed property before franchise property. I might have said something incorrectly here, and you may have to edit that, but there are advantages potentially of going directly with the brand. But I do think that the challenge is that they're a big ship, and they've been going in a certain direction for a while. Now to move that ship into something that's maybe a little more owner friendly is very difficult, and they're slow to move that. And like Euan said, the advantage for them is that they can be quite nimble and quite creative when they come up with the management agreements and franchise agreements that they offer. So,
right.
Look, and let me just say one thing so that we're all clear. This isn't. There was no, and if I came across as brand bashing, that was not the case, because in fact, it's the opposite. I sit on the owners global board for IXG. I sit on the advisory board with Hilton. So I love those guys. We have a great relationship. All I'm saying is that they provide huge advantages to owners. But I just see a massive win-win where you've got the brand then think of how many brands there are today that are really focused on that niche marketing, that driving of the engine and the rewards programs and the reservation systems. So we're utilizing all of that. All that I'm saying is that from an operations perspective, we're there on the ground and just more involved. It's factual. We'll always be more involved because that's the nature of our business. But that's a win-win. That's a win-win. The brands are not necessarily losing out financially because they have a franchise over an HMA, because all that generally happens in their HMAs is they're dropping their fees to align. So they're not really making a lot more money by managing. And you can argue that they may have more control and the lenders like that, but there's an insanity to that as well. And I'm sure we're going to talk about emerging markets where they just don't have an infrastructure, and they may have if we're talking about Africa and Middle East or whatever, maybe they're set up in Dubai, but they don't have a Cape Town office or a Johannesburg office we do. And that's where we spend our money to put that infrastructure in so that we maximize the brand for the owner. The brand makes money, we hopefully make money, and everybody's happy. So that's all I'm saying. This isn't bashing. On the contrary, franchise should be a no-brainer, and I think we're probably going to chat a little bit about what the new world looks like. So,
yeah, I think that was my. I also didn't feel it was a bashing at all, and to your point, Baron, about the big ships, the tankers that you need to move, in particular in emerging markets. It is difficult because where there is an infrastructure for third-party management companies, which also isn't everywhere. I mean, if I look at the African continent that I've traveled quite a bit, quite extensively over the past few years, there isn't something ready everywhere. So it is really, for me as an owner, the boots on the ground and somebody I can talk to, somebody who can react and doesn't sit thousands of miles away. I think that is something which would be important to me as an owner. Now, again, we were saying that in the US market, it is it's very prevalent. Do you find, Euan, that it's more open? Okay, you mentioned IHG, but others that are more open to looking at the thing, particularly now where I think brands are sitting in situations with many hotels closed, and they say, how do we carry on? Baron, you mentioned contracts that are being renegotiated, the terms of which and how long they will run and so forth. So is that something which they are more open to now, 6 months into COVID, versus what they were 2 years ago?
Yeah, let me quickly kick off, because again, this just supports what I just said a couple of minutes ago. We're in discussions right now with IHG, Hilton, Marriott, Hyatt, all of them, because they want to still grow scale, and they've realized that as they've had to scale down in their resource through COVID, that they need good third-party operators and franchise to help them grow. And listen, why was it so popular in the US and UK, Europe? First of all, that's where the brands generally have their head base. They want to get a lot of flags on the ground, so franchise makes perfect sense. And our competitive landscape for us in the third-party management space in USA and UK is massive. I mean, there's thousands of management companies. If you take the more emerging markets, and we talk about Africa, for instance, one of the reasons that brands came in and insisted they manage, besides Baron's point about, especially in Africa where lenders did seem to have more comfort, the reality was there were very few locally based third-party management companies with Valor's global brand experience. They tended to be more domestic, local brand centric, but when the big brands came in and they looked at them and they saw that, perhaps they were Johannesburg or Cape Town based, they had only ever worked in Africa and didn't understand how to maximize the brands and how to drive the brand processes and systems and loyalty and rewards, et cetera, then they insisted that they manage. And now I think as groups like us, as they're starting to really realize that, we've put the infrastructure on the ground, so we cover revenue management, sales and marketing, operations, project management, et cetera. We know how to rebrand, reposition. We know how to develop the brand with all the brand hallmarks. And we're operating their brands around the world successfully, so they have a lot of comfort. And this is how they're going to grow. And that's why they've come to us and said, help us. We want to grow. And now we have a local partner there in these emerging markets, and what a great win-win and what a great synergy.
I just want to add to that real quick, Neil, is that Euan also adds a value by actually being able to sort of screen the investors, the owners, because he knows the market better than if someone were to drop in from Marriott or Hilton or Hyatt and just fly in there and determine whether or not these guys are qualified. Oftentimes, as you know, their balance sheets are very domestic, right? Not very international. And frankly, you can tell whether or not they're going to be a good owner or not, just because Euan has probably done business with them previously or has a relationship with similar people to them. So I think that's also a value add that people often forget.
Now, Euan was threatening to talk for a couple of days or for a whole day, but we already talked well over 15 minutes, which is probably the longest chat that I've done in conversation with, but at least I had two great partners there. So I think we agree that franchise is evolving further into the developing markets, and the third-party management companies, also, and hopefully that will work, in particular for a continent like the one that I'm looking after, Africa, but also Asia, where we've got our colleague Robin and whatever. I think the model is there, and I think we all agree that brands, are key. In particular, in developing markets, no question about it. In more sort of developed markets, to be your own brand might be a little bit easier, but in a developing market, it certainly is. It's great to have the brand, and with the right partners, that brand will work. Gentlemen, I say thank you. I send kind regards to US from a cold Cape Town. Thank you for your time. Looking forward to seeing you in real life very, very soon. Thanks for that, and goodbye.
Be safe, be well. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, Baron.